This episode, we sit down with Zac Newton, the head coach of Indian Hills Community College in the NJCAA Division 1. Coach Newton shares exclusive insights on navigating the college soccer recruiting process, the impact of the NJCAA pathway, and how his players are leveraging their junior college experience to transition into NCAA and pro opportunities. Whether you're a high school athlete looking for a pathway into college soccer, or a current college player seeking transfer opportunities, this episode is packed with must-know advice from one of the top coaches in the NJCAA. So don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this interview with Coach Zac Newton. All right, so we're kicking off. You've given me a nice sweeping view of that backdrop over there, and your schmick shiny office at Indian Hills, mate. But it's good to have you on the call. And like I said to you, we've been doing kind of a round trip of our network of Aussie coaches who are kind of living and breathing the coaching dream in the US, mate. So it's really informal and just us kind of chatting about, the program, where you're at, a little bit about you, your background. And it's always good to hear from a fellow Aussie about their experiences for all these years across the US market. So let's maybe kick off. Let's go back in time. You grew up in WA, and tell us a little bit more about the football side of things, how you came up in that system.
Yeah, so I grew up in Mandurah most of practically all my life. Played for Manchester City Football Club. So obviously now there's the NPL, and I think before there wasn't the NPL. It was just state led. So grew up playing with Manchester City from U12s upwards. And then I also went to a soccer specialized school, so Safety Bay in Rockingham. So every day, I think it was a 30-minute drive. I commuted myself there by train, by bus. It's an hour and 15 minutes, I think, for me to get to school every day, just one way. But yeah, grew up in that realm. High school team was very successful. We won 2 state titles. The club team was kind of flip-flopping up and down between Prem and First Division. Played Resis primarily before coming to the US, and a bit of first team. And then I had some state experience as well. So I played with a couple of the state teams. I went to South Australia with the U19 schoolboys team, which I don't think that you do U19s over in Australia anymore. I think it just goes up to U16s, if I'm not mistaken. But then at some point while I was training with my high school team, we had, NSR at the time came and they visited and, talked to us about the college pathway. And, a lot of my mates, I think at my high school, it's a sports specialized school. It wasn't really taken too seriously by a lot of players, which was frustrating because I was there for, serious training in a serious environment. But it wasn't always that case. And then coming out of high school, my grades weren't great. And so I started working in trades. And I don't know, just a lot of my mates are tradies and nothing against trade jobs, but it just wasn't just what I wanted to do. The tradie lifestyle, my mates would work through the week and then go hard on the weekends. And there was just not really a point for me there. And so I took a gamble and was let's try this pathway out. I want to see how far I can get with soccer. It looks pretty professional. I want to get a degree. I want to work in sports was my goal. I felt that by staying in the US, in Australia, I wasn't gonna make that happen. I didn't think there was a whole lot of opportunities for it. And even just coaching club, it's more of a voluntary thing. So there wasn't a lot of exposure and experience through there. And the sports teams, there wasn't we have sports teams, but there's nothing compared to the amount of sports team there are here in the US. So yeah, in 2012, I decided to kind of take a leap of faith and come over to the US and test it out, and went to Peninsula College. So that's kind of.
Is that right after U12?
I graduated in 2011 and then went into a trade, did an apprenticeship. And so I did, pretty much for about 8 months was doing an apprenticeship. But I think around that time was kind of when I also decided I wanted to go to the US and just needed to do something to make money, right? I had to save up some money. But yeah, so pretty much the following year is when I went. I didn't go straight over. We have a kid, for example, who's just graduated. He's coming over this February. So I didn't come over that quickly, but like you still really get like a year before you really have to kind of start thinking about getting into university anyway.
Yeah, you've got that gap year period, so you've got that time to kind of think about it. But, so talk to us about your first experience kind of transitioning over into college. It was Pensacola?
Peninsula.
Peninsula?
Yeah, Peninsula College in the NWAC. So there's like 3 different governing bodies for junior college. There's like NJCAA, there's the California Community College Athletics Associations, the Triple CAA, and then there's the NWAC, which is the Northwest Athletics Conference. And so Peninsula College at the time, I was like, what the hell am I doing here? You know, it's a small town. It's like 28,000 people. And like later now though, like I haven't been back for a while, but it's like, I want to go back so bad because I miss the place. It's beautiful. It's really scenic. You know, the campus overlooks I think it's the Juan de Fuca Strait. So borders Canada. You look up to the south and there's the Olympic National Park, which is just beautiful snow-covered mountains. It's gorgeous. It's kind of like where they filmed like Twilight and all that stuff. We're like, I think like 2 hours away from Forks, which is where the whole story is based. But yeah, it's a small junior college program, kind of, you know, nestled in the mountains, not in the mountains, but just at the base of the mountains. You know, ferry ride, we're 2 hours away from Canada. We had a really nice complex called the Wally Sigma Complex. Really nice turf field. Now they've got a really good setup. Now they've got like locker rooms there. They've got covered bleachers, floodlights. They've put a lot of money in since like the success that we've had. And so it's a really good situation for a junior college. And they're a very successful program. Like Peninsula College has been the powerhouse. And it started to be that, I think, back when Andrew Chapman, my coach at the time, took over back, I think it was like the early, like 2008, 2009, but he built that up and they became really good. And in the year that I was there, we won 2012 and 2013 titles. Like we were undefeated, really good team. We beat UW in the spring. So we had a really good team of guys that went on to some pretty good schools. And we were probably one of the best programs, I think, in Washington at the time, you know, at any level, like D1, D2, NAIA, D3. We had a really good program.
Did you do the full 2 years or did you only do 1 year there?
I did the full 2 years. I think I was one of those that had to kind of complete the 2 years. I didn't quite do the qualification for it, but I'm pretty sure I had to. Like my grades weren't that great, and I think I had to get an associate. So I got an Associates of Arts, which, you know, when I try to explain it to a lot of kids coming in, you know, they want to do sports management. They're like, well, we can't do an Associates of Sports Management. Yeah, that doesn't really exist. It's more of like you do an Associates of Arts or an Associates of Business or Associates of Science. And then it's just kind of like your building blocks before you go into your sports management degree. But yeah, no, I did my full 2 years. And then after 2 years, I went to Farley Dickinson in New Jersey. I think primarily because I had a point to prove going there. You know, that was one of the schools that I was initially considering when I first came out, but like they didn't really give me any like offer. It was like, hey, there's an international offer, like a scholarship you can get, and that'll take off like 10,000. I think I still had like 48,000 to pay, which was ridiculous. Like I couldn't afford it. But then after my 2 years at Peninsula College, you know, 2 successful seasons at a JUCO, that same school was like, well, we'll give you a full ride to come in. And so, yeah, so I think
that's the definite, right? Yeah, that really is like if you commit to that 2 year period and you're in an environment that's really progressing very well and you know doing as well as you did with that program. 2 year junior college market then acts as a really good sounding board and platform, right? Those 4 year schools, Fairleigh Dickinson now is typically within the top 50, top 100 in D1. Definitely no slouch. I know we had on the women's side, one of our girls graduated from there, from Canberra, and I know the conference and school. So, you know, that's. Did you find that was the case, like that? You know, being in a really strong junior college environment set you up for success to go into the 4 year space. You got a full ride off the back of that. Is that the case?
I think a little bit of yes and a little bit of no, just because, you know, we kind of steamrolled in non-conference the rest of our teams. Like it was honestly for me, outside of maybe the national, like not but our postseason tournament, like the games during season, we won typically pretty comfortably. So like it was almost a lot of our times our practice games were more competitive. I think maybe, you know, that being said, postseason, there were some very competitive games. Like I think 1-0, 2-1. They were pretty close, but we had like a lot of games where it was like 10-0, 5-0. It did help me in the regards, to be in a competitive environment to then move up. I just kind of wish, like maybe at that point, some of the teams were a little bit more closer together in terms of the level, because all the teams when I moved up were, the level was just higher as a whole. Like we weren't playing those teams that were really low that we beat 11, 15-0. Like we were now, every team was good. So yeah, I mean, and then it did help prepare me a little bit. And like, I think just the expectations that we as a program had, and the expectations that our coach had, and the environment was very competitive. And so if we didn't do the right things, there were consequences for it. And it just, because obviously when you move on to Division I programs at a high level, they're a very, very high standard. And so it's not like your typical maybe state league football where sometimes things can be a little bit casual. And so you've got to be very switched on at practice. You can't come and just have fun. I mean, you go to practice to have fun. You do soccer because you enjoy it, but there's definitely an air of like, we're there to accomplish something. We're there to get better every day, even if it's just 1%. And we have goals to try to compete and win. So I think short answer, yes, it did. And so no, it was definitely was a step up. It was the ones that moved on to that level that didn't find that next gear were typically ones that kind of struggled and kind of petered out. One of my teammates, unfortunately, we both went to the same school. I ended up transferring to another school, but he get the offers that he needed, so he ended up going home and kind of almost wasted essentially 3 years, which was unfortunate because he was a good player, but he just, he wasn't as proactive in the recruitment process to move on as he needed to be.
Right. And you find that, playing at a place like FDU, did that help in terms of, I guess on two fronts, right? Obviously you're a college coach now, to be in that kind of environment where you say it's a professional environment, the expectations are a lot higher, the quality and the standard across the board is a lot higher, the conference is tough. There's no room to move. You're not kind of going in there thumping teams like 10-0 plus in that kind of environment, in Division I environment. It's almost like you're in a pressure cooker. Like you said, single swim, your mate probably didn't survive that environment, but you thrive, right?
Yeah.
You feel like that helps you in terms of then progressing onto coaching roles and what you're doing to.
Definitely, because I've got first-hand experience with what our guys here are going through, what they're trying to achieve. And everything that I do with my guys is to try to make sure that maybe certain situations that happened in my experience don't happen to them, or they do. So, I think talking about like the recruitment process, for example, I know that my guys that have actually put the effort in, that are doing what they need to do, that are listening to the advice that I'm giving them, have been successful. The guys that are being very lax and just expecting that every coach is just going to come crawling after them have struggled. Things like grades. There was a kid in Peninsula that was arguably probably the best striker in program history. He set the season goal scoring record. He set the career goal scoring record. Actually, I think he tied it. He was the only kid on our team out, I think, of 8 sophomores that didn't make an all academic team. And all of us were transferring and moving on. He didn't go anywhere.
Wow.
He ended up moving back to Nevada. And so just like trying to tell my guys the importance of, you come here and school's expensive. Like you have to pay for it. And so if you come in expecting that your talents alone, especially now with everything going on with the NCAA, like the roster cuts and everything, scholarship limitations, like if you think that just being a talented footballer is going to get you into these programs, it's not. And the reality is my inbox gets flooded with, I probably wake up with at least 50, 60 emails a day, and all players trying to get recruited. And they're all, there's a lot of players that aren't that good, but there's some very talented players. And we don't have a finite budget, and so it's up to coaches to really try to make sure they make their dollar stretch as much as they can. And grades is an important piece of it. So, we have one kid right now, probably, could be at a top 50 Division I school, and his grades are just, they're not where they need to be to get him there. And that's something that's really hindering he's still getting Division I interest, but his grades are really hindering him from making that move to something that's going to get more of exposure, maybe even go professional.
Yeah. Do you find that, I mean, it's all about balance, right? So you've got to have both, the best of both worlds coming into the system. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist entering into the system, but the system does give you all the tools and resources, right? It's just down to you to really put your head down and do the work, right? And that's probably a testament to those who make it, and it's a very small percentage, right? We're talking about less than 1%, make it to the next level of playing football if they're lucky enough to get that in terms of professional play. But it really, what you're talking about is interesting because it's testament to if you can focus on both your academics and your athletics and really put your head down and do the work, then that's really a platform for you to succeed in any facet, whether it is you got to go get a great job post your 4 years, or you're going into, a professional soccer or football environment to, play at higher levels, right? There's a certain level of, there's a certain standard and a demand there, right? So for me, obviously FDU, talk to us about the growth of the game, right? Because we've got the World Cup coming up in the US next year. Lots of things happening there. The semi-pro game, literally for me, every single year we've got several of our clients playing across USL or MPSL or otherwise, both male and female. What do you see on that side of the fence? Talk to me about, your transition from a D1 student athlete. I believe you did play a little bit of, pro soccer in the US. How is it kind of shaped now, and how does it also or affect your recruiting? Do you have to look international more often than not, or are you kind of seeing that these leagues that are expanding and the teams that are expanding within it, these academies that are growing in the US system, that you can probably pull in kids locally as well? So there's a few different questions there, but I guess your transition from D1, you get a chance to go then play at higher levels in the US system back then. And then what do you see in terms of the landscape in the US system and the growth of the game, and how's that affecting your recruitment?
Firstly, thanks for the hype up. Unfortunately, I didn't make it quite pro. It was more kind of semi-professional, but I appreciate it. But yeah, I did play the Seattle Stars a bit, which was kind of a team in Washington for a bit. I was playing for Red, White, Blue, Adria in Chicago. But yeah, so a lot of leagues that maybe ex-college players that were starting to play into, and some ex-professional players too, it definitely was still a very high level. The youth league over here and how soccer is going over here it's improved dramatically. Now, so you got the Generation Adults Cup, for example, and I've seen there have been MLS teams that have gone into that, and they've come up against like the Barcelonas of Manchester United, Chelsea, Real Madrid, and they've come out on top in some of those games. They've beaten those teams. Now, that happening at the senior level, is Real Madrid losing to Seattle Sounders? Not, but at the youth level, the teams are actually, they're somewhat having that success, and I think just a lot of it is just down to the athleticism focus here in the US is huge, and so that facet is really helpful for the American game, and that's just kind of how the American style is. It's big, strong, fast, physical. The speed of play is super quick. But in terms of where we're looking, we are tending, especially a lot of schools now, to go a bit more American. There's a lot of reasons because of that. Obviously, with the Vanderbilt kid, the quarterback, potentially there hasn't been anything official yet, and so this isn't me saying it's going to happen. I have no idea no one knows what's going to happen, but there's been talks that maybe if you go JUCO 2 years, it doesn't, and so then you go to a 4-year school, and then you've got 6 years to get maybe not just a bachelor's but a master's. That's been one rumor that's gone around. I don't think that one's going to happen. What I think potentially might happen is it might go to a 5-year platform. So now you've got 5 years to complete a degree instead. So maybe 5-6 years to complete, and that could be really helpful and I kind of wish that was my case, because I could have got a master's while. There's that with the 28 roster cap as well. That's forcing everything to go down in terms of players. So now if Clemson or North Carolina or Syracuse or any of those big programs, UCLA, Wisconsin, if they have a roster of 30, they're cutting it to 28. Now it's moving 2 players down per team, so they're going they have to go either D2 or D3, NAIA. It's pushing everything down. I think now with just some of the success of how JUCO programs have gone and 4-year schools recruiting more JUCOs, there are a lot more Americans now considering. The problem with considering, at least for me, for example, is that a lot of kids think that coming down to JUCO it's easy. And I think for some junior college programs that's true. I would consider our program, and there's a lot of other programs just like us, especially the ones that made the national tournament, are good enough to compete against NCAA Division I schools. And it's not just our level, like it's the same with Division II, it's Division III, it's NAIA. You know, the top schools can compete and do well against other divisions and conferences. But I think there's still that misconception from American kids and international, because we're JUCO, because we're only like I guess technically a TAFE school, because we're not a big time university, that we're not a good program. But we've had good results against NCAA schools and we beat them. And our schedule for this spring, right, we play 4 Division I, and then in preseason for next season, we play 3 Division I teams. So we're not being played against if we're able to compete against those programs. So yeah, a lot more kids are starting to consider us. They're seeing the financial affordability of it, especially with the roster limitations and the scholarship limitation. You know, why go to a Division I school and maybe be a walk-on and pay $30,000-$40,000 when you can go to a JUCO and maybe pay $0 if you're a full FAFSA qualifier and Pell Grant qualifier, you know, $5,000-$10,000 at most. Like, why go into all that when you can just go to a JUCO? And with how recruitment's going now, a lot of 4-year coaches are wanting experience. So they're looking for transfers. Like, it's so easy for a kid to hit the portal. Then you've got the international market. And so I think these kids are starting to realize that the opportunities that used to be here to maybe go. I think that answered the 5 or 6 questions you had.
No, yeah, I get it. That's I got a knack for doing that, mate. I put everything.
You're all good.
One big mushroom, mate, and get you to pick it apart and try your best to put it all together. But that was really good. But what you were basically talking about was recent. When you talk about the Vanderbilt kid, is the recent Pavia ruling. That's kind of still hasn't been firmed up, but tons of changes across the NCAA, and you're right. All of those changes, roster cuts, have a twofold effect. Obviously, you reduce the rosters at a D1 school. It's going to be more competitive to get into those schools. But then those that do get cut are quality players for the most part, and they end up in these Division II, Division III, or NAIA programs. So it starts leveling up a lot of these programs that probably were on the periphery, even in Division II, Division III, or the NAIA, and weren't competing all right. But the junior college system, more so, even for me, like if I've been doing this for 15 years, I went back 15 years ago, 9 times out of 10, I'll probably say, look, probably not junior college, right? And I've seen more and more, I mean, you're a great case in point, more and more of our clients who they're looking at the US market, and as a family, they go, look, I can go to Australia, to a university here, and or even a technical college or a TAFE, and I'm not going to have to pay anything up front. Obviously, they understand that down the line that they're going to have to pay that. Most of them do, obviously, with the help. And you're not going to get the integration of both athletics and academics like you'll get in the US system. So the cost factor really comes into play in discussions with these families, right? But what you see in the JUCO market is you can come in at a very reduced cost for the most part, even if you're not on massive amounts of scholarship compared to a 4-year school, right? But there's a lot of those benefits in the junior college market: increased playing time, you know, building up your minutes, which is really important. Showed coaches in the 4-year market that you're actually, you know, you're competitive, you're playing, you got minutes under your belt, you're a tenured player, and it makes that a lot more easier for you to kind of transition into the 4-year space. But look, I'm digressing again, but if we go back to the changes, it's an interesting thing in my head, and something in an article that I read. It was either an ESPN article or otherwise on the Vanderbilt kid, the Pavia case. With all these changes happening, where do you see kind of the landscape of college soccer shifting? Is it going to become, you know, almost to a point where divisions are playing against each other? Is it, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of things happening all at once. And I think the NCAA in some cases are almost losing a little bit of their power, right? Where do you see college soccer kind of shifting towards? Is it changing, or is it just going to be the same thing forever in terms of the way it's structured or otherwise?
Well, now there's obviously the NIL, you know, name, image, and likeness. So, like players, student athletes can now get paid for that. So there's that situation occurring, and that's why, for example, the Vanderbilt kid is trying to petition to come back for another year, which he's been granted, right? He's been granted fifth year. So now the rule is, so the guys that were with me when I was at Southeastern that won the national title, right? My like Osago and those type of guys, they're now able to come back for another year to continue their education and play.
Wow.
Same thing. My Dutch kid, Bart, is just gone from UIC to Wisconsin. He was the MVP, the conference MVP. So they're getting that opportunity to come back and continue their education on scholarship for another season, which is crazy. But I saw an article, I can't remember where I saw it, but something that like it could be as early as 2016 and 2017. 2026 and 2027, where maybe there is more of a professionalized like youth tier for college soccer. And that's been a big argument with a lot of coaches is, you know, like it looks like we're going to paying athletes. It looks like it's becoming professional. So let's figure out a way to do it properly and safely, because there still is an issue with a lot of young athletes that just kind of inherit all this money and they spend it like crazy. So maybe something where there is a financial structure in place to save and to help educate these kids on money management. Like things like that. Like there's been a lot of different talks. You know, some conferences have just have become non-existent. Like if you look at the Pac-12, Pac-12 for me used to be one of the strongest conference in the country for soccer, and now it's gone. Like Oregon State's not in it anymore. UCLA's in the Big Ten. I think California is in the ACC. Like there's just been such a shift. And a lot of it just is revolved around like money and sponsorships and stuff like that. So I don't know. Like it's been so frustrating just to even deal with it just on my end, because it's not just that. Like there's schedule changes going with the NCAA. My players getting recruited. This has probably been the most difficult year that I've ever experienced, just because of everything going on with the 28 roster cap. My preseason has changed multiple times because of four-year schools not knowing what's going on with the NCAA. So initially I had a Chicago date set to play some D1s on the 15th and the 17th. I end up changing one team, and now it's the 12th and the 14th just because of this whole. So I don't know, but I think with just how televised and mediaized college athletics is, I don't think it would be the worst thing to go in that direction. But I think because they still are students and kids and teenagers, trying to do it in a way that's safe, that protects them as well, especially with the longevity. Like that's why the whole, you know, I'm happy they did that, because imagine you're like a young, like, well, Tom Brady wasn't that good in college anyway. Like apparently he wasn't like a first round draft pick. Like for those big time players that can get all that money through college, but then they break something and they're never the same player again. Now they have this wealth that they've accumulated that they can use, and it can help them in their futures, and they're not just stuck. So I just think there has to be some way to do it properly. I don't know what it's going to mean for different levels. You know, they might do a tier where there is a professional tier, and then everyone else is just in their own different divisions. Like maybe Division 1 turns into maybe the Division 1 level breaks off and becomes its own pro tier, and then Division 2s and Division 3s kind of have their own like semi-professional, not paid tier. I don't know what's going to happen.
So exciting and scary at the same time. But I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna, rugby really exploded union, right, in the US. And the way that I've kind of researched that growth and what I've seen from that growth is that they almost have what the college soccer system and other sports might be looking toward, because if you look at I think they got like a premier kind of league, and it's D1 schools, NAIA schools, D2 schools, and they're all playing against each other and they're playing rugby. That's my view of it. It's almost like the best of the best across all the different kind of, I don't know. It's really interesting discussion, and it really shifts everything dramatically, right? And I think if you get to the collegiate level professional kind of environment, that's going to be something that's just so different and so unique. Like, go get your education, but also get paid to do it, and yet you're a professional. I think the money's going to always going to be in American football, basketball, and traditional sports. I don't know how it's going to pan out for soccer, but soccer's growing, right? It's the fastest growing in the whole of the US, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how it kind of changes, and the landscape changes over the next few years. But give me some kind of obviously as an Aussie coach, all the things that you've experienced playing in JUCO yourself, playing Division 1, when you transitioned into coaching, you've had so much tremendous success. Obviously, we had players with you at SEC in Iowa. Won a national championship there, was phenomenal. Indian Hills, I think a very different environment. From this season, it looked like, and this was your inaugural season, is season 1 or season 2?
Oh, no, this is season 1. I literally started 2 weeks before the start of the season, yeah.
Yeah. But did you inherit a lot of those players, or did you have to go on a recruiting run pretty quickly?
Oh God, mate! I kind of panicked at the start of the season because we didn't look as good as I was kind of concerned. We had a leadership group, and I'm like, guys, I'm kind of concerned with how we look right now. But then but I'm a bit of a panic planner, so like I always, until we get there, I'm like, what if we like? It's kind of a good thing because I end up going out and we end up recruiting 2 very, very good players that were pretty pivotal in our season. Diego Lazaro was a Canadian kid we brought in. Initially, I think he had an offer from Lafayette for a full, and then chose to try to go to Spain, I believe, and try to do that like professional route when he was younger. Didn't work out, so he came back and was playing in the Quebec League, so we recruited him in, and he was a really integral part of our team. Was very unfortunate. I think if he was a sophomore, he probably would have got All-American, but he was a freshman. So next year, I think he will be. Fabian Arroyo, which was a Costa Rican kid, he's a U20s national team kid. He's like made his professional debut at 17 on an amateur contract and a youth contract. So, but 2 very good players that we were able to bring late that really helped us. But I was a little bit nervy at the start of the season, so I did try to bring in some players late. We had a big time kid that was meant to come in for fall that didn't pan out because of his immigration. An African kid that we were trying to get in, and when we tried to get his interview appointment date, like it just kept getting pushed back and back and back, and eventually he just didn't come in. So, so we did have to look a little bit for a little bit more squad depth.
I think, but it was a standout season, like going all the way into the national tournament rounds. I know so I knew Felix prior to you. I knew the coach prior to Felix at Indian Hills. And I don't think they necessarily had, from what I understand, the same kind of impact that you had in your first season, right? So what is it for you? And it's not about, I'm not trying to hype you up, but I'm kind of...
It's okay.
Where do you think that for you're seeing success in the coaching ranks. So it's a very interesting thing, I think, for as a foreign coach. Obviously, you've been in the system, you understand the system. That could be one factor in your success, but success at SCC Iowa, winning a national championship. Now you transitioned over to Indian Hills, and you're kind of going into those national tournament rounds already in your first year. What is it that you think is a secret sauce for you? And if it's a secret, keep it a secret, but you know what I mean?
No, I think I'm like, when it comes to me dealing with my players, I think starting out was tricky for me because I was this young, inexperienced coach, and I came in with all these demands and just acting like me being a hard ass and aggressive was going to give me success. But I think as I've gone through, I've been through the journey that my guys are going through, which definitely helps me. I do care. I try to be as honest as possible with my players. We had a situation with a kid this year where he had a red shirt because he was hurt, and he could have come back and played another season for us next year. And I had to have the conversation with him. And again, this came from a place on caring. This wasn't me trying to get rid of this kid because I would have given the kid the money to come back. But it's like, mate, you're going to burn money here. Like, if we can find you a Division I school, like, you're going to get more than a bachelor's potentially, and it's going to help you in your future. And so I said, as much as and this kid could have come and stayed and been like an All-American striker for us next year. I said, mate, this just doesn't make sense for you. As much as I want you to come back selfishly, for me, I'm thinking about your best interest. I don't think it's the best interest. I said, look, if we don't get a D1 offer for you, sure, come back and have a good season, and then we'll move you on right away. But he actually ended up getting a D1 offer, and he moved on. I try to put myself in my player shoes as much as possible. I try to be as transparent and as honest as possible. And I think one thing that really sets me apart is I don't think there's many coaches out there that can really match. This is going to sound arrogant, my work rate. I work my ass off. And if we're not where we want to be, like, that was my first season SEC. We had our asses handed to us. I think we had a bunch of 12-0 losses. And that postseason, I said to myself, my assistant, that's not happening ever again. Like, we got to work. And then the following season, one of those teams that we lost to 12-0, we actually beat 3-2 in the regular season. And the number one team in the country, I think, was Iowa Western. And we went all the way up to the 90th minute and only lost 1-0. That team would have beat us 15-0 the previous year. So we had a lot of turnaround. And I think this season, if you ask the players, like, I think I've got a great relationship with the group. The first thing I did was I met with I had a team meeting. I met with each of them individually to try to get to know them more as a player, for them to understand what I was trying to do, to kind of make sure that the connection was there for us to be on this mission for what we were trying to achieve together. And I think that really, really helped us. And just having high standards, but then also being like, I allowed myself to be vulnerable at times too. Like, if I knew that I wasn't doing things the right way, I wanted to know if I wasn't doing it. And I think in the fall, and I've been pretty vocal with my players about this, but I don't think I was as present as I would have liked to be, living in Des Moines. But then also like I said, I took this job extremely late, and I had made a commitment to my club that I was with, and I couldn't just abandon them right before the start of their season. So I was juggling 3 club teams, as well as my college team. So I was literally up from, I think, 3 a.m. to about 10:30 Monday to Tuesday. And then I would have weekends where I might be coaching 12 games. And so and it was a struggle. It was a struggle. And, that was one feedback that I think, our players do their surveys, and they say just a little things to be a bit more organized. And I know, but I'm also super reflective. Like, that's something that I think that I try to do. Like, when I have my play meetings, I do meetings with them all the time as well. Like, I meet with them 2-3 times a semester. This is how you're starting out. Are you settling in? Like, a mid-season, like, this is, if you want more game time, this is what you have to do, things like that. And then, like, an end of season meeting, like, this is where you're at. But I also try to get them to give me, obviously, just like, is there anything that we can be doing from a coaching perspective to enhance, like, not necessarily your experience, but also how can we help you get to where you need to go? Like, I've been in their shoes, and just talking about the experience of my former teammate that was in Peninsula, like, I don't want that to happen to any of my guys. Like, I want them to move on to bigger and better things, and I want our program to be a stepping stone. And I think, leading and trying to go from that direction and that place, I think, is what I'm hoping is going to continue the success of this program, and moving forward is just, having a genuine care for the athletes, not just having them to come in and win titles for us and just to use them, but to be an environment to help them grow and to experience success. So that, and like, I'm going to be a hard ass on them when they're here, but the whole objective and the goal of that as well is to just prepare them as best as I can for wherever they go, because the standards are just going to be high, especially if they're going to go to a good D1 or a good D2 or a good NAIA program, which is where I want them to go. To create an environment where it's as tough as I possibly can create it, so that where no matter where they go, they're prepared.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's kind of helped us. But yeah, this was a very successful season. Yeah, first time we made the semifinals in program history. So I'm really proud of that, and hopefully next season we can win the whole thing. We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully. Fingers crossed, mate. But I mean, going all the way, like you said, you go into those final rounds. You had Iowa Western 2 times over, and then
three times. Yeah,
okay.
we had it. So our conference is just us and them.
And then you had Tyler, right, as well, and crazy schedule. You got like the best of the best in junior college, Division 1 junior college, and in your first season to do that. It's testament to what you said, right, and being able to have structure, being able to wear your heart on your sleeve where you need to, but also having the discipline and creating that environment, discipline and buy-in, right? And I think that's really, really important. And I'm super stoked. I'm really, really excited for you. I'm excited for Indian Hills. Obviously been across the program for a number of years now and seen the ebb and flow of it, but I think you're going to take it to another level for sure, like you did with SEC. I'm going to leave you one last question. You're the manager, global football now, the manager that inspires you the most or has inspired you the most, and the player today that is really, number one kind of draft pick.
You mean what, like professionally or like on
Professionally.
Managers, I don't know. Like, I'm an Arsenal fan, so I love Arteta. I love what he's doing. And he's a young coach like myself, so I think that's something that I really kind of I try to emulate too. But like, I love watching just how kind of like Pep and Jurgen Klopp operate, and just like the love and togetherness that they have with their players. I think the more that I get into coaching, when I first came in, I was just like, it's definitely about winning and being successful. And the more I think about it, like, I think the better bonds and connections and growth I can help my players with, I think that is just going to be a byproduct, that success of doing those things. So I think that's been something, like, looking at how Pep and Klopp have just kind of reacted. Like, they have like this fierce rivalry, but they love each other too. And I think that's awesome. But yeah, so those are probably managers I think I try to emulate and learn from as much as possible. But there's also other coaches you can definitely, like, always. I think Jose kind of said something about, like, all the best coaches, they kind of pick and steal little bits and pieces from everywhere. So, but then I think it doesn't work unless you kind of know how to, like, implement it and you understand those concepts. So you have to learn and understand them before you can really try to implement them. In terms of, a player, again, just me being an Arsenal fan, I would probably say right now for me, Odegaard. Just having him back and healthy and just what he can do is just, for us as a team, has just been phenomenal. He's an amazing player. unfortunately, I don't really see a lot of Aussies right now that I can really think of the top of my head that are really kind of paving the way for us. So, yeah, definitely probably Odegaard would be my guy.
Awesome. Mate, look, I'm not an Arsenal fan. I'm a Liverpool fan, so I can't comment. But I always loved the Arsenal team back in the Wenger days and otherwise. And, mate, really great insight today. Phenomenal. Took a bit of a tangent in the norm. Good to talk about like the politics of college soccer at the minute and what that landscape's kind of looking like. And, man, I'm just so stoked for you at Indian Hills. I think you're going to just continue to kick it out of the park. You got the infrastructure, the resources. I believe, you know, I'm watching you as a young coach. I'm looking at you and I'm saying you're in the right environment. I think it truly allows you to be able to shape a lot of these kids and get them to that next level, which is what it's all about, both academically and athletically, man. And I'm really grateful for the time today.
Yeah, appreciate your time, John. Thanks, mate. All right.